Genetically modified food is now everywhere, and most of it is controlled by a handful of powerful companies behind the scenes. Most of what you see sold as farm produce today is grown using modified seeds, heavy chemical inputs, and industrial farming methods designed for speed, size, and profit. Think about it. That unusually large carrot, the tomatoes that last for weeks without going bad. This is not how food used to be. These same corporations influences what the public is told. That is why you rarely hear governments speak clearly about what is really happening. And the effects are starting to raise concerns, especially when it comes to what people are consuming daily. So in this video, we are exposing 9 UK farm food brands you must avoid, because what they represent and what they actually are not the same. 9. Asda Farm Stores. When you see a name like farm stores, it immediately creates a picture in your mind. You think of fresh, produce coming from real farms, something natural, something close to how food used to be grown. That's exactly what the name is designed to do, to make the product feel simple, local and trustworthy. But the problem is, Asda Farm Stores is not an actual farm. It's a supermarket label. And when this name was introduced, it drew criticism because many people felt it was designed to create a farm image that doesn't truly reflect where or how the food is produced. Now, when you place that next to how modern food systems actually work, the gap becomes clearer. A large portion of supermarket produce today comes from industrial-scale farming, where crops are grown using modified seeds, chemical treatments, and controlled systems focused on producing more in less time. The goal is consistency, size, and longer shelf life, not necessarily the natural process people associate with traditional farming. And this is where it starts to become relatable. You bring these products home, expecting that fresh farm-like quality, but the experience doesn't always match. Some vegetables look perfect on the outside but feel different when you cut into them. The taste can feel flat, less natural. Sometimes they spoil quicker than expected, and other times they last unusually long, which raises questions about how they were grown or preserved. That difference between what the label suggests and what you actually experience is what makes this brand stand out. Because it's not just about the name on the packaging, it's about the picture it creates in your mind and how that picture doesn't always match reality. And once you begin to notice that gap here, it becomes much easier to spot the same pattern in other farm brands across different supermarkets. 8. Little Birchwood Farm. When you walk into a supermarket and see rows of neatly packed meat under Birchwood Farm, everything looks normal. Clean cuts, consistent sizes, shelves always full. It feels reliable, like the supply never runs out. But if you stop and think about it for a second, a bigger question starts to come up. Where is all this meat actually coming from? Because the volume is massive. These shelves are restocked constantly across stores, across cities, every single day. Yet most people have never seen the farms, never seen where animals are raised at that scale, or how that level of supply is even maintained. This is where people begin to question the system behind it. To meet this kind of demand, production has moved far beyond traditional farming. Animals are bred, fed, and processed in highly controlled systems designed to produce more in less time. Modified feed, growth-focused breeding, and chemical-supported farming practices are now part of keeping that supply consistent. And when you bring that back to what ends up on your plate, it starts to feel different. Some people notice the meat shrinking too much when cooked. Others see excess liquid in the pan or a texture that doesn't feel as firm or natural as expected. These are small things, but they make people stop and think about how that meat was produced. Because at this level of volume, it's no longer just about farming. It's about systems designed to keep shelves full no matter what. You start questioning how that much meat is produced so consistently, it becomes easier to question what else might be happening behind the scenes across other products as well. 7. Tesco Willow Farm. A Tesco Willow Farm chicken gives off a simple expectation. It feels like something that should be fresh, properly sourced, and handled in a way that keeps its natural quality intact. The name itself makes it feel calm and familiar, like it's coming from somewhere close and well managed. But what many people don't realise is that a lot of these products are not coming from one clear local source. They are part of a much wider supply system where sourcing can happen across different regions and even different countries depending on cost, availability and demand at the time. And that's where the concern starts to build, because once food is travelling across long distances before it reaches the shelf, it has to be preserved. It has to be kept looking fresh, kept stable, and kept in a condition that still attracts buyers when it finally arrives. That often means controlled storage, processing, and in many cases, treatments that help extend shelf life. Now bring that into a real-life situation. You buy the product expecting freshness, but once you get home, the experience feels off. The taste doesn't feel as rich. The texture feels slightly different. Sometimes it spoils faster than expected, and other times it lasts unusually long without changing much at all. Both situations raise the same question. What has this product gone through before it got to you? This is not something most people think about while shopping because everything looks normal on the shelf. But the journey that food takes before it gets there can be long and heavily controlled, and that journey can affect the final quality in ways you only notice later. So the issue here is not just where the product is labelled from, but how far it may have actually travelled, and what had to be done to it along the way to keep it looking the way it does. Once you start thinking about how much handling and movement is involved before food reaches you, it becomes easier to question how much of what you're eating is still as fresh and natural as it appears. 6. Aldi Ashefield Farm. There's a certain expectation that comes with buying chicken from a supermarket. You expect it to cook properly, to have a natural texture, and to actually taste like chicken without needing too much effort to bring out flavour. But over time, more people have started noticing something different. Instead of browning in the pan, the chicken begins to release a noticeable amount of water. The heat drops, the meat starts to boil in its own liquid, and what should have been a simple cook turns into something else entirely. Even after it's done, the texture can feel softer than expected, sometimes slightly rubbery, and the flavour doesn't come through as strongly as it should. This isn't just random. To keep up with the level of demand supermarkets handle today, production has become highly controlled. Chickens are raised in systems where feeding, growth rate, and processing are all managed to produce consistent results at scale. The goal is to get uniform size, steady supply, and predictable output across thousands, sometimes millions, of units. But when production is pushed in that direction, something else tends to change. The structure of the meat, the way it holds water, even how it reacts to heat, all of that can be affected by how quickly animals are raised and how they are processed. That's why you start seeing these small but noticeable differences when you cook it. And this is where it becomes a real concern for everyday buyers. Because what looks normal in the packaging doesn't always behave the way natural meat used to. You only discover it when you actually use it, and by then, it's already on your plate. If you've ever noticed your chicken flooding the pan or tasting different from what you expected, you're not alone. Take a moment to like and subscribe, because what's coming next connects even more of these patterns together. All this naturally leads to a bigger question. What else has quietly changed in the food you buy without you realizing it? 5. Woodside Farms. Over time, certain product names start showing up again and again. Not because of branding, but because of what people are saying after they buy them. Woodside Farms is one of those names. Across different Tesco product pages, a pattern begins to appear in customer feedback. People talk about meat going off sooner than expected, packs that smell wrong when opened, and cuts that don't feel as fresh as they looked in the store. Some mention bacon with an unusual texture, mince that feels watery, and sausages that break apart too easily when cooking. Individually, these might sound like one-off issues, but when similar complaints keep repeating across different products under the same label, it starts to feel less like coincidence and more like a pattern. And this is where the concern shifts from appearance to reliability. Because when you're buying food, especially meat, you're relying on it being properly handled from start to finish, from sourcing to processing to storage, all the way to the shelf. If something goes wrong at any point in that chain, the result is what people are describing: changes in smell, texture, and overall quality. Now think about how most people shop. You don't see that process. You only see the final product sealed and presented as fresh. So when you get home and something feels off, it raises a bigger question about what happened before it got to you. And this is what makes Woodside Farms stand out. It's not just about one bad experience. It's about repeated complaints pointing to inconsistencies, where what's promised on the outside doesn't always match what people experience after purchase. Because once trust in quality starts to slip, even slightly, it changes how you look at everything else on that shelf. If one label is already raising these kinds of concerns, it makes you wonder how many others are quietly going through the same thing without as much attention. 4. Redmir Farms. Sometimes the warning signs don't show up in the store. Everything can look perfectly fine when you're picking it. Smooth onions, firm potatoes, clean packaging. Nothing immediately suggests there's a problem. The difference only starts to show after you get home. Across customer reviews, a pattern begins to appear. People talk about onions going soft much quicker than expected, sometimes within a couple of days. Potatoes that look fine on the outside but turn out dark or patchy when cut open. Packs that seem fresh at first but begin to break down sooner than they should. At first, it's easy to dismiss this as coincidence, but when the same kind of complaints keep coming up from different people, it starts to point to something more consistent. Because freshness isn't just about appearance, it's about how long food can naturally hold up after you buy it. And when that time shortens, it raises questions about everything that happened before it reached you. Think about the journey. Produce like this often moves through multiple stages: harvesting, storage, transportation, distribution, and finally, the shelf. During that process, it may be stored for extended periods, exposed to changing temperatures, or handled in ways that affect how long it will last once you take it home. So by the time you're buying it, it may already be closer to the end of its natural life than you realize. And this is where it becomes relatable. You plan your meals thinking the vegetables will last a few days, but they start spoiling earlier than expected. You cut into something that looked perfectly fine, only to find it's already going bad inside. That moment is when the question hits: how long has this really been sitting before I bought it? Because when freshness becomes unpredictable, it's no longer just about quality, it's about trust. You can't rely on what you see anymore. The outside looks fine, but the inside tells a different story. And once that starts happening repeatedly, it changes how you shop, how you store food, and how confident you feel about what you're bringing into your home. Because if basic produce can already be this inconsistent, it raises a bigger concern about other products that go through even more handling, processing, and time before they reach your plate. 3. Bay. Fishmongers. Fish is one of those foods people expect to be fresh, not just in appearance, but in smell, texture, and how it cooks. You pick it up expecting something clean, something close to what it should naturally be, but this is where many people start noticing something off. Across customer feedback, there are repeated complaints about fish having an unusually strong smell even before cooking, pieces that feel overly wet or soft, and fillets that don't hold together properly in the pan. Some mention finding bones left inside, others talk about the texture breaking apart too easily. Now, fish is naturally delicate, but when these kinds of issues keep showing up, it raises a different kind of concern. Because to keep fish looking fresh from the moment it's caught to the moment it reaches the shelf, it goes through a long process. Storage, transportation, temperature control, and preservation. And in many cases, that involves treatments designed to maintain appearance, reduce spoilage, and extend shelf life. That's where chemical handling becomes part of the conversation. Certain preservation methods are used in the industry to slow down decay and keep fish looking market ready for longer periods. But when that process isn't handled properly, or when the supply chain becomes too long, it can start affecting what people notice at home: the smell, the texture, even the way it reacts when cooked. And this is where it becomes very real. You bring the fish home expecting freshness, but as soon as you open the pack, something doesn't feel right. The smell is stronger than expected. The texture doesn't feel firm. Once it hits the pan, it releases too much moisture or breaks apart completely. That moment changes everything. Because fish is one of the foods where freshness matters the most. And when that starts to feel questionable, it becomes harder to ignore. And once you begin to question how fish is being preserved and handled before it gets to you, it naturally leads to a bigger concern. How much intervention is happening behind the scenes just to keep products looking fresh on the surface? 2. M&S Lochmuir Scottish salmon. Salmon is one of those foods people naturally associate with health. When you see it packaged cleanly, labelled clearly and presented as premium, it creates the impression that you're getting something fresh, carefully sourced and good for your body. That's the expectation. But once you look a little closer, a different question starts to come up. Because salmon like this doesn't come from small, quiet rivers the way many people imagine. A large portion of supermarket salmon today comes from intensive fish farming systems, where fish are raised in large numbers within controlled environments to meet constant demand. And that scale changes things. To maintain supply and keep the fish looking market ready, systems are put in place to control growth, protect against disease, and preserve the product through long storage and transport processes. By the time it reaches the shelf, it may have gone through more handling than most people realize. Now bring that into your own experience. You open the pack and sometimes notice a stronger smell than expected. When it hits the pan, it releases more liquid than it should. The texture can feel softer, less firm, and the taste doesn't always match what you expect from something marketed as premium. These are small details, but they are the kind of things people keep noticing. Because fish is one of the most sensitive foods when it comes to freshness, and once that freshness starts to feel questionable, it becomes harder to ignore. And this is where the bigger concern comes in, because what is presented as clean, simple and high quality on the surface may actually be the result of a system built around maintaining appearance, shelf life and supply at scale. And once you start seeing how much has been added just to make food last longer and taste stronger, it leads straight into the final concern. What happens when all of these issues, production, handling, processing and quality, come together under one brand, Waitrose Duchy Organic? By the time you get here, everything starts to connect. The names, the labels, the image of natural, farm-grown food, all of it is designed to make you feel like what you're buying is cleaner and safer. Waitrose Duchy. Organic fresh produce sits right at the top of that image. When people see it, they think of fruits and vegetables grown the right way. No shortcuts, no chemicals, no interference, just natural farming, harvested and brought straight to the shelf. But this is where the reality becomes more complicated. Because fruits and vegetables at this scale don't just move from farm to shelf overnight. They go through storage, transport and controlled environments to keep them looking fresh for as long as possible. And this is where intervention comes in. To manage supply and avoid spoilage, produce is often stored in controlled conditions and exposed to systems that slow down or speed up ripening. In some cases, fruits are picked before they are fully ripe so they can survive long transport, then later brought to ripen in controlled environments before reaching the shelf. That's why you sometimes see fruit that looks perfect on the outside, but doesn't taste the way it should. Now bring that into real experience. You buy fruits expecting natural sweetness, but the flavor feels flat. The texture can feel off, either too firm or too soft too quickly. Some fruits last unusually long without changing, while others go bad faster than expected once opened. These are the small signs people start noticing, because when ripening is controlled and timing is adjusted for distribution, the natural process of how fruit develops flavor and nutrients can be affected, and that's where the concern grows. Because over time, consistently eating produce that has been handled, stored, and altered to meet supply demands raises questions about what you're actually getting, not just in taste, but in quality. This doesn't mean everything is unsafe, but it does mean what you're buying may not be as natural or as untouched as it appears, and that's what brings everything together. because from modified farming methods to chemical use to storage and ripening control, the system is built to prioritize shelf life and consistency, not the natural process people believe they're buying into. And that's why this sits at number 1, because it represents the final layer of the illusion, where even something as simple as fresh fruit may not be as natural as it looks. If this opened your eyes even a little, don't keep it to yourself. A lot of people are still buying these products every single day, trusting the labels without knowing what's really behind them. Share this video with someone close to you, family, friends, anyone who shops for food regularly. It might save them from making the same mistakes. And if you've personally experienced any of these issues, strange taste, food going bad too quickly, or something just not feeling right, drop it in the comments. People need to see real experiences, not just what's printed on the packaging. Make sure you like this video and subscribe, because we're going deeper into how everyday products are made, what's really in them, and what you should be avoiding next.